Welcome back. Last time we considered Al-Ghazali's critique of Masha'i philosophy, and this time we'll turn to the third phase of Islamic philosophy with the founder of a new school, Illuminationist or ishraqi, in Persia in the 12th century. The towering figure of Shahabuddin Suhrawardi was often called Sheikh al-Ishraq, the master of illumination. Shahab means a comet, a beautiful name that suits him well because he illuminated the sky of the Islamic universe in his tragically short life. Born in Suhraward, he moved to Zanjan and then to Isfahan, where almost all the major philosophers studied or lived for some time. Al-Farabi visited it, Ibn Sina lived and taught there, and Suhrawardi studied there with Fakhruddin al-Razi as a classmate. At the age of 20 in Isfahan, he was initiated into Sufism after studying Islamic sciences and Islamic philosophy. He was already a very accomplished person and began to write beautiful mystical treatises. Then he went on a journey of horizons. In Sufism, there are two types of journey, one within one's soul and the other in the external world. The habit of many Sufis when first initiated into the inner journey would be to also go on an outer journey, leaving home in order to show one's detachment to the world. So Suhrawardi left Isfahan after initiation and journeyed through eastern Anatolia and settled in the city of Aleppo in Syria. He became friends with the ruler, the son of Salahuddin, the person who defeated the Crusaders and captured Jerusalem and ruled over Egypt and the Near East. But Suhrawardi soon attracted the jealousy of other scholars, and there were political machinations going on. Tragically, Suhrawardi was killed at the tender age of 38. It's very rare for a philosopher to be killed in the Islamic world. It's only happened 3 times, and it always has to do with political reasons. It's remarkable that a person who established the second perspective after Masha'i thought died so young. Nobody talked about Suhrawardi in the immediate generation after his death because of its violent nature. His teachings went underground. Then, about 30 years later, they resurfaced and became the foundation of what we call the School of Illumination, or the School of Ishraq. In his short life, Suhrawardi's accomplishments were remarkable. Let me say something about him before going into what he did. To say he was a genius is blasé. He was very, very handsome, and he dressed sometimes in very fancy clothes, sometimes in rags. He wanted to detach himself not only from the world, but also to detach from detachment. If he had worn ordinary clothing, that itself would have become an attachment. This is one outward example of the detachment from detachment that he practiced, the highest form of detachment, you might say. He was attributed with extraordinary powers by his contemporaries. I won't get into a discussion of that here, but suffice it to say that people about whom these kinds of things were said were people who were not only philosophers in the sense of the intellectual tradition of doctrine, but they were also highly realized spiritual beings who possessed spiritual powers of an exceptional nature. It was said that Suhrawardi spoke very eloquently, both in Arabic and Persian. Nobody could debate him, and that skill aroused the jealousy of some people, especially because he was so young. He was in his late 20s and early 30s, and he would tie anybody up in knots in 15 minutes. And no one has written more eloquent Arabic prose than Suhrawardi in philosophy. The Hikmat al-Ishraq is at the very height of the perfection of Arabic philosophical prose, and his Persian treatises compare to Shakespeare in English. So a person with these qualities was bound to have an exceptional life. Although his life was short, he left behind some 45 books. Suhrawardi wrote major doctrinal, metaphysical works, as well as shorter works summarizing them, and also mystical treatises or mystical recitals. He also wrote a number of prayers and liturgies and so forth, some of which are absolutely remarkable. I want to say a few words about the most famous and important work of Suhrawardi, which is the culmination of his thought and the crown of his writing to which other writings lead. It's his Hikmat el-Ishraq, which you could translate as philosophy of illumination, or the theosophy of the Orient of Light. Hikmat al-Ishraq was written under dire circumstances when Suhrawardi knew that he was going to die. It was written, according to some authorities, in a period of 40 days, in which Suhrawardi put his pen on paper and never took it off, like the seamless stroke of a brush in a work of Japanese calligraphy. He said of it, quote, "What I've written in this book is a divine gift. My curse be upon those who learn this and teach it to those who are not qualified. And also my curse be upon those who learn this and do not teach it to those who are qualified." Unquote. That's his last will and testament. That concludes our introduction to Suhrawardi and the School of Illumination. Next time, we'll briefly examine his thought in more detail, along with a sketch of how he resolved the problem of God's knowledge of particulars, and how other philosophers began the process of rapprochement between various schools of Islamic thought.